Hello everyone, this is Matt with Carp Cartel Bow Fishing Store, and today I'm going to do a little demonstration on how to shim your muzzy reel. We have a basic muzzy reel here. If you look, you see how much the handle wiggles, and that's directly related to the gear moving on the inside. You can see how much that gear is moving. So how we got to this point, lid on the back, real simple. There's a screw on the bottom, take it out, turn it a little bit, and it pops right off. If you have a lever reel, it's pretty much the same thing. Just be careful when you slide it off, it doesn't break that lever. Now, when you get into the back of the reel, you're going to have a bunch of screws looking at you. I found that for a lot of work, this is a little screwdriver. I sell it at AutoZone. I picked it up. It doesn't have the regular 5/16 tip. It's a much smaller tip, and I find it's pretty handy. If you start doing a lot of work, I actually went to an electric rechargeable just because it's just easier. So I go in and I'm going to pull some of these screws out now. Now, if you need your reel shimmed or if you need a kit to rebuild your reel, the Carp Cartel Bow Fishing Store does sell those. They're in the reels area for reel parts. Okay, so we got all our screws out of there, all except our anti-reverse right here, which isn't going to hurt anything. And we get down to our main gear, and next step is going to be to take the handle out. And you can take the handle out before you take the screws out the back. It doesn't really matter, either or. All right, so we're down to this part here where you can see our main gear is super loose. I mean, you can probably hear it. Not a good place to be. And I described that in my other video about how the teeth just don't correctly mesh. And when they don't mesh, they have a tendency to strip out because they're not quite catching correctly. So what we need to do is we need to look at this where our gear, our mesh points are. The hardest part about this is actually getting the right amount of shims in, not over shimming, because you end up taking it out and putting it back in about 3 or 4 times usually. The more you do them, the better you kind of realize, you know, how many it's going to need without having to do that. You will sometimes have to shim both sides. So that's one side. I'm going to pull my spring off here, and I'm going to slap another one on that side. Okay, so we have our main gear, and what I did is I pulled these off and I added my shims inside of these, and then I pulled this one off and added the shim inside the spring. It doesn't really matter, you can add it outside or inside as long as it just prevents it from sliding back and forth. I'm going to pull the anti-reverse out. It's going to be a lot easier when you're testing it to have the anti-reverse out. So we just slide it back in the reel like that. We have to make sure our notch is in on the one side, okay? And really that's going to just check and see how well our gears are matching up with that pinion down below. So I can just stick my handle in and I can turn it. And it shouldn't be hard to turn. If it feels like it's hard to turn, like it's binding, you probably put too many shims in it. Okay, and we also need to check the other side. So what I like to do is I'll turn it like that, and however the other side ends up, I put one of these bridges over it, and if the holes line up and everything was turning right, that means I probably did it right. And in this case, I slid it on there and everything lined up and meshed. So let's just tighten this guy down. And then we're going to tighten up this other side quick so that way at least you guys can see that I took the play out of the handle. And then everything else is just putting everything back together. Now I have seen anywhere from no shims coming from the factory all the way up to 10 shims coming from the factory. And again, these parts are all available at www.carpcartelbowfishingstore.com. And we just slide this handle screw back in. I do offer this as a service. You ship them to me, and for 20 bucks a reel, I replace all the guts and I shim them. It does seem a bit extreme to some people, but if you think about it, I'm also throwing in $10 worth of parts. So I'm getting 10 bucks for real to rebuild them. You can see here, now I pull on my handle and my gear has absolutely zero play in it. I mean, it doesn't move. And that just means all my teeth are lining up. So when I hook into that big fish, my gears aren't going to slip and try and bind on me. Very important thing to do to shim your reels, and hopefully this explains why and how.